Outlaw bikie gangs. In Queensland, the president of the Bandidos Gold Coast chapter was charged, along with the Mount Isa president of the Rebels gang. Members of the Hells Angels and Odin's Warriors were also charged. In his bid to continue the battle, Queensland's Attorney-General Jared Blay will present a dossier of tough new laws to State Cabinet today. Mr Blay says the laws include confiscating the motorcycle of any bikie gang member who's charged with a crime, then crushing it if they're convicted.
We know that they travel on their bikes and they wear their colours as fears of threat and intimidation, not only the Gold Coast but right around Australia. Our ultimate goal is to rid the state of Queensland of criminal motorcycle gangs.
The new laws are due to be introduced in state parliament tomorrow. Jared Blay says the tough legislation is necessary to stop the outlaw motorcycle gangs in their tracks.
Enough's enough. We've drawn a line in the sand. The incident at Broadbeach was the last straw in terms of 40 to 50 bandidos coming out at night in full colours and in front of innocent bystanders and tourists at Broadbeach. That was enough, and then topping it off, of course, was in going to the watch house in full colours as a sign of support for the few that were arrested.
Other new bikie laws include banning gang members from gathering in groups, wearing club colours in bars and restaurants, and owning or working in a tattoo parlour. Jared Blay is also recommending that any outlaw motorcycle gang member charged with any offence should be refused automatic bail.
They won't get bail. If they want bail, they have the onus to prove that they're not going to be a risk to the community anymore. It very much in line with the information the Chief Magistrate sent out recently. He essentially said that the elements of community safety have to be paramount above the rights of the criminal motorcycle gang members.
The Queensland Law Society says it hasn't been consulted about the new laws and believes police have been given too much influence over the legislation. The Society isn't the only one upset by the way the crackdown on outlaw motorcycle gangs is being carried out. This man, who doesn't want to be named, is a recreational rider on the Gold Coast. He's told ABC Local Radio he's been stopped 11 times in 11 days for questioning.
And I've been treated like a criminal. I'm sick of being asked if I'm a drug dealer. Oh, it just goes on and on.
He's furious about how many recreational riders are being targeted.
Can't they tell the difference in their position and they're pulling over every Joe Blow? What a joke. It's not just me. Look, I've had mates on their BMWs been pulled over and they've even told me. This is an unnecessary chaos.
The Australian Motorcycle Council represents recreational riders across the country. The council's head, Sean Leonard, is urging the police to look harder at riders before stopping them.
What they seem to have done almost over the period of the last 3 or 4 days, the irony is that they've galvanised the support of the broader motorcycle community, which until a week ago was quite supportive of police action against criminal activities. But now that everybody who rides a motorcycle in Queensland is potentially going to be targeted and be called a criminal, they've actually galvanised motorcycle riders in support of members of those organisations.
Chief Superintendent Jim Keogh from the Queensland Police has apologised for any inconvenience, but he says the measures are necessary.
I do ask for understanding. This is on the back of some unprecedented behaviour in Broadbeach a number of Friday nights ago, and of course we are using a lot of police resources out there in the field, and they are using discretion as well, but it is difficult for the officer from time to time to ascertain, whether or not the person is a criminal motorcyclist without pulling them over.
That's Queensland Chief Superintendent Jim Keogh ending that report from Stephanie Smale.
Okay. Oh, I think that sucks. And I'll tell you why I think it sucks. I think it sucks because it appears to be a reaction to the Gold Coast Chamber of Council complaining that their businesses are not making a profit because there's not enough tourists going to the Gold Coast. And for some reason, between the Chamber of Commerce and the Liberal government in Queensland, they've come up with the wild hypothesis that the reason there's not enough tourists going to the Gold Coast is because everybody's afraid of motorcycle gang violence. I don't actually see that as a valid connection. It seems to be the latest step in a long line of authoritarian, draconian police union and police association led changes to laws all over Australia, statewide, each one trying to be the toughest against what they call outlaw motorcyclists. And these outlaw motorcyclists are supposed to be the 1% of all motorcyclists who actually employ a motorcycle in order to conduct criminal activity. Now, the very idea that such a category of motorcyclists exists is pretty much a result of Hollywood fantasies. Movie called The Wild One comes to mind, Marlon Brando, and that stemmed from a post-World War II phenomenon where there was an awful lot of combat veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder who found they just couldn't fit into post-World War II United States society, but they could get themselves a second-hand army surplus motorcycle and they could hang around with a bunch of their friends and they could get drunk and ride motorcycles and experience the kind of adrenaline rush that they were used to in combat. And a lot of them still had some of their military paraphernalia. Some of them had their leather jacket from when they were a tank gunner or commander or driver or whatever, and others had their leather jacket from when they were a tail gunner in the B-17 fleet bombing Europe. Some of them had German decorations that they'd cut off the corpses of the people that they'd killed. And they figured if, you had an Iron Cross and I killed you and I've got your Iron Cross, I can put it on my motorcycle jacket and wear it as a souvenir. Americans are big on souvenirs. So what with the fact that there were adrenaline-crazed, PTSD-affected World War II veterans riding motorcycles for a very brief period, and most of them grew out of it, other ones turned into compost. And Hollywood pushed the idea. It grew into a bit of a subculture, and the only way young new members could become absorbed into the platoon level esprit de corps was if they suffered some form of indignity which was deemed to be equivalent to the wartime service they couldn't actually undergo. Then of course there was the Korean War, which gave them another bunch of war vets, and then the Vietnam War, and there's always been a steady stream of traumatised military veterans who want to spend a few years on a motorcycle. There are also other people who've grown up looking up to that culture. If you think about it, the level of loyalty that motorcycle gangs display towards their quote sacred unquote colours, how if you insult one motorcyclist then you've got to fight all of his mates because you've insulted their sacred colours and you put a slur on their whole club's honour. Yet you ask a police officer, why is it that if somebody shoots one police officer then the entire force comes down with everything up to and including military level weaponry? The answer is, oh, well, they have insulted the Queen's Crown, which is, on that officer's hat or on their shoulder. And if you insult the Queen's Crown, then, the entire forces of the British Empire shall descend and give you a kick up the arse, mate. I would suggest that the major difference between people who are in the police force because they want to hang around in a bunch of, uniformed, fit people who are tough, who are paid to wear badges of honour and rank and show how tough they are and run around and keep the peace. And the people in the motorcycle gangs is the people in the motorcycle gangs didn't get out of high school without acquiring a criminal record. There's not much actual difference in the headspace. They all want to be told where to stand. The people join the motorcycle gang because they want to be part of a structured organisation. Now, you've got overlaid onto that the drug scene in Australia. Now, I remember back in the 1980s when probably 3/4 of the nurses at the hospital I was training at used to smoke pot. There were country and western songs about it. Cheaper than booze, safer than pills, and you can buy it from your local farmer. And wasn't far wrong. Then a fella called Johnny Howard got into office and his whole rave was dopers for dopes. And at the same time he went on a cost-cutting campaign, and the first thing Johnny Howard did was he closed the Tasmanian branch of the Customs Department. So anybody who wanted to bring opiates into Australia shipped them into Tasmania and then posted them through the post. And the price of heroin dropped by 50% and the purity went up 300%. You know, it went from being 30% pure to 90% pure. And in Johnny Howard's first Prime Ministership, when he did not introduce the GST, the number of Australian heroin overdoses sort of tripled. It just spiked. And all of the hardcore junkies who couldn't control their habit, they got killed off. So during Johnny Howard's first re-election campaign, he was asked a question by an ABC reporter at a press conference which really upset him, which was, is heroin going to be cheaper under the GST? And he spat the dummy and went bananas. And he really didn't like it because she actually got to say, because it's 6 times cheaper than it was before you became the Prime Minister. Oh, he got upset, deeply upset. Reinstituted the Tasmanian Customs Branch. Heroin kind of went off the market. And all the people who used to be heroin addicts in Australia, if they really had to shove something up their arm, they moved on to speed. And of course, you don't need an opium crop to make speed. People make it in their bathtub out of cold and flu tablets. At about the same time, the right-wing side of politics was in control of the labour laws and people were being sort of pressured into working longer hours, harder and faster. And the rich people might have been able to afford cocaine for nose candy, but a lot of the working class got turned on to speed, particularly the truck drivers. And I understand from listening to the radio, the demand for speed in Australia just blossomed, went off out of sight. You know, pot was being suppressed, heroin was really expensive and there weren't many heroin addicts anyway. Speed was the big thing. And the motorcycle gangs, they seemed to step into the breach as a way of supplying an illegal substance to a very large demand. And I'm sure that some of them are still involved in it. I'm also fairly sure that there's not much connection between somebody riding a motorcycle with a colours jacket on it in the Gold Coast and people not going to the Gold Coast for a tourist holiday. I think people are not going to the Gold Coast for a tourist holiday because they haven't got the money and they can't afford to travel, and if they had it, they wouldn't blow it on something as silly as that anyway. The world economy is not supportive of everybody having a month off to go and spend 17% more than their usual salary anymore. And treating the motorcyclists as scapegoats so that you can try and provoke them into some kind of a violent reaction so that you can then justify an even heavier police crackdown, it's just ridiculous. It really is absolutely ridiculous, and nobody with half a brain is going to fall for it. But the trouble is, there's an awful lot of sheeple in the suburbs who haven't got half a brain, and if the television tells them that it's all the cause of the bikies, it'll be just like when Hitler said it's all a problem caused by the Jews. And as somebody said, you know, Jews and bicycle riders, they're the problem with the German economy in 1936, and somebody else said, bicycle riders, what have they got to do with the economy? And the other one said, nothing, just like the Jews. It's scapegoating, it's political scapegoating in the hope that somebody will push back so that they can then justify a bigger crackdown. Because Campbell Newman likes watching people in neat straight rows with straight seams in their trousers and shiny little boots goose-stepping up the road, enforcing law and order. And the Liberal national government seems to have chosen motorcycle gangs as their scapegoat. Is it going to change the amount of violence on the streets? Yeah, it probably will. Because eventually, the sort of cranky pants who wants to join a motorcycle gang is probably going to decide that he's going to go out there and show the cops what's what, and it'll have the predictable response. Is it going to change the demand for mind-altering substances that are not covered by the Pharmaceutical Act? No. No, in fact, I'd say that as the economy unfolds and more people find they desire to change their brain chemistry, then the demand for illegal substances as well as the demand for prescription medications to change people's brain chemistry, mood stabilisers and happy pills and antidepressives and sedatives and anti-anxiolytics. It's all going to go up. It's all going to go up. And at the moment, 65 to 80% of the people in jail are in there for what they call drug-related activities. It clearly stands to reason that the war on drugs has patently failed ever since President Nixon instituted it. Drug use has gone up, the price of drugs has gone down and the quality has gone up. It hasn't worked. The thing to do is take a leaf out of the book of Uruguay and legalise it, tax it. In Uruguay, everybody's allowed to have 40 grams per month, and they pay tax on it. And it's no longer a forbidden fruit, and the government gets their cut. And the population is sort of calmed rather than inflamed, which is what happens when the government takes a cut of booze and lets people advertise booze and sell it at all hours of the night. 24 hours a day you can buy booze somewhere. And it's causing vast amounts of violence and PFD syndrome. That's pissed and fell down syndrome. People are so drunk they fall off their bloody feet, hit their head on the ground and finish up in hospital, costing money. Doesn't happen when they're stoned. At least that's my memory of the 1980s, when Australia was a much milder and gentler place. People would club together and buy a $20 stick of pot, and they'd go and rent a video, and they'd sit down in a room and be happy all night, and no hangover and fit to go to work again the next day. It's not what happens when people are using speed to be able to work 3 jobs so that they can pay the rent and afford to save up for a mortgage, which is pretty much the way the right-wing side of politics wants the working classes to be these days. So anyway, for what it's worth, that's my rant on the draconian anti-motorcycle gang laws which are coming into force in Queensland. And no doubt, a week after that, the New South Wales Liberal government will agitate to do something so that they can be the toughest again. The police want to have a war against someone. They've got all this marvellous anti-terrorist gear. They used a $400,000 improvised explosive device-proof armoured car to serve a drug warrant in Tasmania a couple of weeks ago. They'd had the thing for months and months and months and hadn't found any bloody use for it, you know. They had to have it because it was in the catalogue of things you can buy. Well, got to have one of them. Then once you got it, then you've got to find a use for it. Too many Australians watching too many American police shows and having fantasies that the world needs to be shot at in order to make it safe for little old ladies to walk across the road. That really is the problem. Here's my rave. Legalise all the drugs. Then you'll find that 60% of the people are not being put through the courts. So you've got 60% of the cops are no longer necessary, 60% of the judges, 60% of the solicitors, 60% of the clerks of the court. They are not going to want to take a pay cut. But we've got a terrible shortage of people in childcare and people in nursing homes. So how about we make it, if you want to keep your policeman's salary or your solicitor's salary or your judge's salary or your bureaucrat's salary working in the court, we'll let you work in the court like that for 4 months a year, right? And we'll let you have your holidays, and then 3.5 months a year you get to work in childcare, and 3.5 months a year you get to work in an old people's home at the level of a nursing aide, right? Maybe assistant in nursing. Lowest peg on the totem pole. So all the cops and all the judges and all the solicitors, they get to do something useful while getting paid at the same rate they're used to being paid, because otherwise they will fucking revolt. But yeah, that would be more sensible. A redeployment of the existing resources to the sectors of society which require it the most, which is the nursing homes where people are going rotten because they're not getting enough nursing, and the childcare centres where the infants are raising themselves in a brat pack in the sandpit because mummy and daddy are off working and there's one high school dropout to every 8 kids. So if she's getting $10 an hour, then, you know, What's their time worth to mummy and daddy? 3 parts 2/10 of fuck all. I was asked for a rant. Ciao.